This screencast is meant to show how within the MYP you can use specific ATL strategies to support students as they have formative practice leading up to a larger summative assessment. Specifically, this is for Rivers of Life unit for Integrated Humanities for MYP2 students. The first step for this unit was providing students with a strategy for how to read critically. This was adapted from Cornell systems. Students were given a critical reading template, and they were asked to use each of these reading strategies in order to learn how to identify main ideas, but also to learn how to summarize. Students then moved on to learning how to do in-text citations. So this was particularly useful as they were reading because they could quickly identify an author or a title and practice doing in-text citations as they were summarizing. The next step was to write descriptive paragraphs, and in this unit we used our content for learning about the water cycle to understand how it impacts river systems. And students practiced using the strategy RENS, so making sure that they have reasons, examples, names, numbers, and if necessary to be using senses to add details to their writing. The next step, we used images of rivers around the world, and they were given a table so that they could analyze those images. The table helped them to break into parts what they were seeing in an image. For example, you can see if there were people, if there were objects, and then you can identify the different types of activities that might be happening within a river system. And the images that they were given were images from Nat Geo website. Students then used those columns with their own observations to write inferences about what they thought might happen next or what might be happening in the images, but to understand that they can only make inferences based on an observation, which means they have an evidence. They have evidence for their conclusions that they're drawing from the images. The next step that we went through was to learn how to write research questions. At our school, students in humanities use a research journal from grade 6, and part of their assessment criteria for the MYP is to be able to explain a research question that they have formulated. And so I help them to use their statement of inquiry to make a question that's open-ended. So it starts with how, and then they can check with a partner to make sure that they have included the unit concepts in their overall research question. The next step, another part of their criteria, is learning how to write an action plan. I do give them an exemplar for this, but I also give them the basic deadlines for different parts of the research and project that need to be finished, because they are larger projects and can take a few weeks of class time, trying to avoid them having homework. The next step we go through, because now they've started their research journal, making sure that they have some basic rules for how to research online. Specifically, I help them go through looking at how the difference between their Google searches, in particular, if they ask a question versus using specific proper nouns. Looking at Control F when they get to the page they're reading through to find the keyword that they actually were searching for, using a minus sign in front of a word that they don't want to find, as we're trying to avoid Wikipedia. And for those students who are more tech savvy, they can get into their advanced search settings and identify different parts of their research that they don't want to see or they do want to see. From this point forward, we can go back and use some of those ATLs that we have already introduced, such as descriptive writing, RENS, and critical reading practice. So when they're going through their research and they're actually recording answers to their guiding questions, they can make sure that they have those details that they've been formatively assessed on earlier on in the unit. The next step, in particular for this unit, one of the things they're being summatively assessed on is perspective. Within INS, they do have to be able to say, not only identify different perspectives, but also to be able to describe the implications of what that type of perspective might have. And for this one, I put together just a really simple 4-corner activity where students can choose the corner they would go in based on these types of questions. If school is canceled, if you get the flu, if you lose a game, maybe if your power goes out at your house, if your parent loses their job, and then to consider perspectives that could be optimistic, realistic, or pessimistic, and then think about what would the implications for those perspectives be. So if you chose yes, what would you do after that? School is canceled for a week. This was a really interesting way to get students to really talk about their own perspectives, but then also in an open discussion in the classroom to see how other students have a different perspective and would behave in a different way based on that perspective. The next step for this one was to use their practice from analysis of pictures and then start to analyze their sources for their research journal. So instead of using people and objects and activities like they did from the picture analysis, they use, and at KIS we use the CRAPI system strategy for analyzing sources. And for grade 7, we only use the first 4 parts of that. So they're looking at currency, their reliability, authority, and purpose. Next step, in order to prepare their large case study, they needed to find images. So I pointed them towards the Creative Commons search site so that they can actually find proper citations from images where the person who owns them is willing to share them. And then the students practice with this, making sure that their in-text citations were done properly on their poster and then also within their bibliography. At KIS, we also use EasyBib. Really helps the students, but we go over how bibliographies are different than works cited pages, and then the basics of it. Make sure it's in alphabetical order, make sure you're deleting the NPs and the NDs, make sure that you're including all of the sources that you used for your research or for verification, and some specific examples if there's more than one author for a source. These students were being assessed on choosing or formulating a clear and focused research question. Formulating and effectively following a consistent action plan was a formative assessment for this first project. Using methods to collect and record appropriate, varied, relevant information, which connected to how they were learning how to do their research online. Structuring information ideas according to the task instructions, which was really heavily relying on their understanding of the action plan. For criterion C3, for the INS, they do have to be able to write complete reference lists and always cite their sources, which includes image citations and in-text citations, which they were fully supported on in this layout. They also, for this summative, were being assessed on being able to analyze a range of sources and to clearly recognize different perspectives and explain their implications. So hopefully you can see from this layout that students were supported from their formative strategies that they were given and then feedback that they were given once they completed work in class, and how all of those steps helped to guide them and support them in their final project. Thank you very much.